This is a mushrooms P. Cubensis trip report by Navi, posted to airwood.org on May 17, 2001. I have been thinking about this experience for a long time. I wanted to write it down while the memory was still fresh, and also to keep a record for anyone who might read it later. I do not take these substances lightly. I have always believed that they demand respect, that they can show us things we are not ready to see, and that they can also teach us about how we treat each other and ourselves. With that in mind, I set up a day that would give me the best chance to listen to what the mushrooms might say. The day was a Sunday afternoon in my small apartment in Manhattan. The sky outside was a dull gray, the kind of sky that makes the city feel a little quieter than usual. I chose this day because I did not have any appointments. I could stay at home, and I could turn off the usual distractions. I wanted to be alone, but I also wanted to be safe. I told myself that I would not take any other substances, that I would not drink alcohol, and that I would keep a glass of water and a phone nearby in case I needed to call someone. I also made a plan to write down anything that seemed important, but I knew that the words might not come until later, after the peak. My intention for the session was simple. I wanted to see what it felt like to look at my own life without the usual filters. I had been feeling a vague sense of unease for weeks, a feeling that something was missing, but I could not name it. I hoped that the mushrooms would help me see the source of that feeling. I also hoped that I could learn something about the way I relate to the world, about the things I take for granted, and about the way I treat my own body. I wrote these intentions on a small piece of paper and placed it on the coffee table where I would see it later. The preparation began early in the afternoon. I measured out 3 grams of dried Psilocybin cubensis mushrooms. They were a light brown, slightly brittle, and they smelled faintly of earth. I broke them into small pieces with my fingers, feeling the dry texture crumble between my thumb and forefinger. I placed the pieces into a glass of orange juice. The juice was fresh, bright, and a little tart. I stirred the mixture gently, watching the brown bits swirl in the orange liquid. The color of the juice changed slightly, becoming a muted amber. I set the glass on the kitchen counter and took a few deep breaths. Before I drank the mixture, I decided to do a short series of yoga stretches. I had taken a beginner yoga video and followed it step by step. I moved my arms slowly overhead, inhaling as I raised them, exhaling as I lowered them. I bent forward, feeling the stretch in my hamstrings, then rolled onto my back and lifted my legs into a gentle V shape. I focused on my breath, letting each inhale fill my lungs and each exhale release tension. The stretches helped me feel more relaxed, more open, and more willing to let whatever came happen. After the stretches, I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, with a thin cushion beneath me. I turned off the main lights, leaving only a small lamp that gave a soft amber glow. I put earplugs in my ears because the street outside was always noisy, with horns, sirens, and the constant hum of traffic. The earplugs muted the sound enough that I could hear my own breathing and the faint ticking of the old wall clock. I placed the piece of paper with my intentions on the floor beside me, within easy reach. I felt the coolness of the wooden floor against my calves, the slight give of the cushion under my hips, and the weight of my own body pressing down. I took the glass of orange juice with mushroom pieces and drank it in one slow swallow. The taste was a mix of sweet citrus and the faint earthy bitterness of the fungi. I felt the liquid travel down my throat, warm and slightly gritty, and then settle in my stomach. I set the empty glass down and rested my hands on my knees. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the world outside my small room, and then opened them again, looking at the dim lamp. The first minutes after ingestion were calm. My mind drifted to the intentions I had written. I read the words again. See without filters, understand the source of unease, learn about my relationship to the world. I felt a small knot of anticipation in my chest. I told myself that I would not rush, that I would let the mushrooms take their time. I kept my breathing steady, inhaling through my nose, exhaling through my mouth, counting to 4 on each inhale and each exhale. I could feel my heart beating a little faster, but not in a panic way. It was more like a drum that was beginning to play a slow rhythm. About 10 minutes after drinking, I began to notice a subtle shift. The edges of the lamp's light seemed a little softer, as if the glass around the bulb were made of frosted water. The colors in the room appeared slightly more saturated, the reds a little deeper, the greens a little brighter. I could feel a gentle warmth spreading through my limbs, starting in my fingers and moving up my arms. My hands felt like they were lightly tingling, as if a mild current of electricity was passing through them. I opened my eyes wider and looked at my hands. They seemed both the same and different. The skin looked thin, almost translucent, the veins faintly visible. I thought about how my hands had been used to type, to hold a coffee cup, to brush hair away from my face. I wondered how many years they would keep working before they grew stiff and useless. The feeling of tingling grew a little stronger after 15 minutes. I felt a faint vibration in my chest, as if a small engine were humming just beneath my ribs. My breath seemed to become deeper without my trying. I could hear the distant traffic more clearly now, even with the earplugs. The honk of a taxi, the rumble of a subway train passing underground, the occasional shout of a street vendor. The sounds seemed to have a rhythm, a pattern, like a song that I could not quite name. I felt a sense of connection to those sounds, as if they were part of the same breath I was taking. At 20 minutes, the visual changes became more pronounced. The walls of my apartment seemed to breathe. The paint appeared to pulse in slow, gentle waves, as if the room itself were alive. The lamp's light flickered not because of the electricity, but because the air around the bulb seemed to move in slow circles. I felt a light pressure behind my eyes, a gentle push that made me want to close them. I did, and when I opened them again, the darkness behind my lids was not empty. It was filled with soft, moving shapes like clouds of color that drifted slowly across a sky. The colors were not the usual blues and whites of a daytime sky, but muted oranges, deep purples, and occasional flashes of bright teal. The shapes seemed to have a purpose, as if they were trying to tell me something without words. I tried to focus on the intention paper again. The words were still there, but they seemed to glow faintly, as if the ink had been lit from within. I read them again, slowly, letting each word settle. See without filters. The phrase resonated in my mind, and a wave of understanding washed over me. I realized that I had been looking at my life through a set of lenses that I had never examined. Those lenses were made of expectations, habits, and the stories I told myself about who I was. The mushrooms were beginning to peel those lenses away, layer by layer, showing me the raw image beneath. My thoughts began to move faster, but not in a frantic way. They moved like a river that had been dammed for a long time and suddenly found an opening. I thought about my childhood, about the way my parents had raised me, about the small moments that had shaped my sense of self. I saw my younger self playing in a park, chasing a kite, laughing when the wind caught it. I saw my teenage self, anxious about grades, trying to fit in, feeling the pressure of expectations. I saw my adult self working late nights, scrolling through emails, feeling the weight of responsibilities. All these images floated together, overlapping, each one a piece of a larger picture. The feeling of my body changed as well. My limbs felt lighter, as if the gravity that usually kept me grounded had loosened just a little. I could feel the floor beneath me, but it was no longer a hard surface. It was more like a soft mattress that supported me without restriction. I could feel my breath moving through my lungs like a tide, coming in and out in a rhythm that matched the pulse I felt in my chest. I noticed a faint scent of pine in the air, even though there were no pine trees in the room. The scent was not a hallucination. It felt real, as if the memory of a forest I had visited years ago had been summoned into the present. Around the 25-minute mark, the experience entered what I would call the early peak. The visual field became a field of moving patterns. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all seemed to be covered in a fine, rippling fabric. The fabric was made of light and shadow, of color and texture. It moved in slow, deliberate waves, like a sea of liquid glass. I could not tell if I was seeing the fabric or if I was feeling it. My mind tried to name the sensation, but words felt insufficient. I thought of the word presence, and it seemed to fit, as if the room itself were aware of my existence. My emotions rose as well. A feeling of awe settled over me, not the kind of awe that makes you say, "Wow," but a deeper, quieter awe that sits in the chest and expands outward. It was accompanied by a small, persistent sadness. It was not the kind of sadness that makes you want to cry, but a gentle ache that seemed to come from remembering that everything is temporary. I thought of my hands again, of how they would one day age, how the skin would become thin and brittle, how the bones would lose their density. I thought of the city outside, of the buildings that would eventually crumble, of the people who would move in and out of my street. The realization that all of this was fleeting made my heart feel heavy, yet also light. I found myself turning my attention to the concept of impermanence. I remembered reading about the Buddhist teaching that everything changes, that nothing stays the same. The teaching had always seemed abstract to me, something I understood intellectually but did not feel. Now, under the influence of the mushrooms, the concept became a lived reality. I could feel the edges of my thoughts softening, the hard lines of my beliefs blurring. I saw my identity as a collection of moments, each one arising and passing away. I saw my fears as clouds that drifted across the sky of my mind, sometimes dark, sometimes bright, but always moving. The room continued to shift. The lamp's glow turned into a warm halo that seemed to radiate outward, touching the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The halo was not a static light. It pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I could feel the pulse in my ears, in my throat, in my fingertips. I tried to count the beats, but the numbers seemed to dissolve. I simply let the rhythm guide me. The sound of traffic outside became a drumbeat, a low thump that resonated with the pulse inside. I felt a strange unity with the city, as if the distant honks and sirens were part of the same song that my body was singing. My thoughts turned to the idea of a garden. I imagined a small plot of earth, a patch of soil where seeds could be planted. Tended I imagine a small plot of earth, a patch of soil where seeds could be planted, tended with careful hands, watered with patient breaths. The image expands, becomes a field that stretches beyond the walls of the apartment, beyond the street, beyond the skyline. Each seed is a tiny promise, each sprout a quiet statement that life can begin again even in cracked concrete. I feel the weight of that promise in my chest, as if the pulse of the lamp's halo were the heartbeat of the garden itself. The colors in the room grow richer. The walls are no longer flat surfaces but layers of translucent skin, each layer breathing in time with me. I can see the fibers of the paint, the grain of the plaster, the tiny dust motes that swirl like slow fireflies. The fireflies do not flicker randomly. They move in patterns that feel intentional, like a choreography that I am both watching and performing. My breath matches their motion. I inhale, and the fireflies drift upward. I exhale, and they descend, gathering at the floor as if to rest. A wave of warmth spreads from the center of my chest outward to my limbs. It is not a heat that burns. It is a gentle expansion that feels like a balloon being slowly inflated. My shoulders drop, my jaw unclenches, my fingers uncurl from their tight grip on the cushion. The tension that had been coiled in my neck releases, and I notice a faint taste of metal on my tongue, the metallic tang of blood that is now more present than before. The city outside continues its rhythm. The honk of a taxi, the rumble of a subway train, the distant siren, all become part of a larger soundscape that I can hear as a single deep chord. It vibrates through the floorboards, through the carpet, through the soles of my feet. I feel the floor beneath me as if it were a living membrane, responding to each note, each vibration. The membrane pulses in sync with my own heart, creating a feedback loop that blurs the line between my body and the environment. My mind drifts back to the garden. I see my hands digging into soil that is dark and moist, feeling the resistance of earth against my fingertips. The soil is cool, it smells of rain and decay, it carries the scent of roots and hidden worms. I press a seed into the ground, cover it gently, and press down with the heel of my palm. The pressure is deliberate, purposeful. I imagine the seed sprouting, breaking through the surface, reaching for light. The image is vivid, and I can feel the tiny push of the shoot as it pushes through the soil, the first leaves unfurling like a small flag. The feeling of the seed growing becomes a sensation in my own body. My spine feels like a column of soil, my vertebrae like layers of earth, each one supporting the next. I sense a slow upward movement, as if something inside me is trying to break through a surface. I notice a tingling in my scalp, a faint buzzing that spreads across my forehead and down my neck. The buzzing is not uncomfortable. It is a gentle reminder that something is shifting. The peak arrives not as a sudden explosion, but as a gradual widening of all the sensations I have been feeling. The lamp's halo brightens, not in intensity but in presence, filling the entire room with a soft, golden wash that seems to dissolve the edges of objects. The walls become transparent, revealing a view of a landscape that is not the city but a vast meadow under a sky that is both day and night. The sky is a deep indigo speckled with stars that pulse in rhythm with my breath. The meadow stretches endlessly, dotted with the same garden I imagined earlier, now multiplied into a field of countless plots, each one a small universe of potential. I feel my body become lighter, as if the gravity that holds me to the floor has softened. I can sense the pull of the earth beneath me, but it no longer feels like a weight. It feels like a gentle invitation. I lift my arms, and they move through the air with a fluidity that feels new. My fingers trail through the invisible currents of the room, leaving faint trails of light that linger for a moment before fading. The trails merge with the halo, becoming part of the larger glow. In this state, thoughts arrive not as words but as images that settle directly onto my consciousness. I see a line of people, each one holding a small seed, passing it along to the next. The line stretches backward into a blur of indistinct shapes, representing my past, and forward into a bright horizon, representing my future. The act of passing the seed feels like an exchange of responsibility, a quiet agreement that each person must tend to their own plot, while also acknowledging the shared soil. A wave of emotion rises, deep and clear. It is not sadness, though I have felt sorrow earlier. It is a kind of reverent awe. I feel gratitude for the simple act of being alive, for the ability to see, to feel, to think. The gratitude settles in my chest like a warm stone, solid and comforting. I notice tears forming at the corners of my eyes, not because I am crying, but because the tears are a natural response to the intensity of the feeling. The tears roll down my cheeks, and each drop seems to carry a tiny fragment of the light from the halo, as if the light itself is being absorbed into my body. The plateau follows the peak. The intensity does not disappear, it steadies. The halo remains, the meadow stays visible, the garden continues to expand. I find myself moving through the meadow, each step feeling like a soft press into a carpet of moss. My feet sink slightly, and I can feel the cool dampness of the moss against the soles of my shoes, even though I am not wearing shoes. The sensation is vivid, and I can hear the faint rustle of leaves as I pass. The wind in the meadow is gentle, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh rain. I inhale deeply, and the air feels thick with possibility. As I walk, I notice other figures in the distance, some walking toward me, some walking away. They are not strangers. They feel familiar, as if they are parts of myself that I have not yet integrated. One figure is a child, barefoot, laughing silently. Another is an older version of myself, with lines on the face that speak of years lived. I approach the child, and the child reaches out a hand, offering a seed. I take the seed, and the child smiles, then turns and runs toward a hill where a small house sits, its windows glowing with the same golden light as the halo. The older version of myself stands still, watching me. Their eyes are kind, and they nod as if to say that this moment is what has been waiting for me. I feel a deep sense of acceptance from that older self, a reassurance that the path I am on is correct. The older self does not speak. The communication is purely felt, a transmission of calm. I sit down on a stone that feels warm from the sun that never sets in this place. I place the seed in the palm of my hand and watch it. The seed glows faintly, a soft green light emanating from its core. I feel the seed's potential, the energy it holds, and I realize that the seed is a symbol of my own intentions, the small actions I can take to create change. I think of the garden in my apartment, of the soil I will tend, of the habits I will cultivate. The seed in my hand reminds me that growth requires both patience and care. Time loses its usual markers. Minutes feel like seconds, seconds feel like minutes. I do not know how long I remain in this state, but the sense of being anchored in the present never wavers. The hum of the city outside continues, but it is now a distant echo, a background note that does not disturb the inner music. Eventually the light begins to soften. The halo dims, not into darkness but into a gentle twilight. The meadow recedes, the sky shifts from indigo to a pale blue, and the stars fade one by one. The garden in my mind becomes a single plot again, the one I first imagined. The soil is still dark, the seed still in my hand, but the surrounding vastness contracts into the familiar walls of my apartment. I feel my body reattach to the physical space. The carpet under my feet feels coarse, the cushion beneath me is solid, The air in the room is cool and carries the faint smell of orange juice from the drink I used earlier. My ears pick up the ordinary sounds of traffic again, but now they are not overwhelming. They are simply sounds. My heart beats at a steady pace, slower than the earlier pulse but still present. I notice my breath returning to its normal rhythm, each inhale and exhale a quiet reminder that I am alive. The come down is gentle. The tears have dried, leaving a faint shine on my cheeks. My eyes feel heavy, but my mind is still clear. I look around the room and see the lamp, the couch, the window, all as they were before, yet each object now carries a subtle aura, a memory of the experience. I reach for my notebook, the one I kept beside me, and begin to write. My hand moves slowly, each word formed with care. I write about the garden, about the seed, about the feeling of being part of something larger. I write about the gratitude that rose within me, about the sense of responsibility that the seed represented. I write about the older self that nodded in approval, about the child that offered a seed without words. The after effects linger throughout the evening. I feel a lightness in my limbs, as if the muscles have been massaged from within. My thoughts are not racing. They are steady, like a stream flowing over smooth stones. I notice that I am more attentive to the sounds around me, to the hum of the refrigerator, to the ticking of the clock on the wall. I find myself smiling at small things. The way the light falls across the floor, the pattern of the shadows, the way the orange juice leaves a faint ring on the glass. Later, after dinner, I sit on the balcony and watch the city lights flicker. The sky is dark, but the stars are visible, scattered like pinpricks. I think of the meadow, of the field of gardens, of the seed in my hand. I feel a quiet resolve forming. I will tend the garden in my apartment. I will plant actual seeds in a small pot on the windowsill. I will water them with intention. I will set aside time each day for quiet reflection, for yoga, for breath work, for the practices that help me ease into this experience. I will consider the possibility of moving toward a life that includes more contact with soil, with plants, with the rhythms of nature. The next morning, I wake with a sense of clarity. My body feels rested, my mind feels organized. I notice a slight soreness in my shoulders, a reminder that I had held tension during the peak. I stretch slowly, feeling each muscle lengthen, each joint move. I make tea, the steam rising in thin ribbons, and I sit at the table, the notebook open in front of me. I read the words I wrote during the come down, and they still hold meaning. I add a few more lines, noting the intention to plant basil in the kitchen window, to start a small herb garden on the balcony, to research local community gardens where I might volunteer. I reflect on the sadness that had surfaced earlier in the day before the peak. The sadness was not a flaw. It was a signal that something needed attention. The mushroom allowed me to see that sadness as a part of the whole, not as an enemy. I accept it, I acknowledge it, and I let it sit beside the gratitude and the awe. I understand now that both can exist together, that the human condition includes both light and shadow. I think about the city and my place in it. The noise, the rush, the endless flow of information all feel less oppressive now that I have experienced a different perspective. I still hear the horns and sirens, but they no longer feel like intrusions. They are part of the background music of life. I feel more grounded, as if my roots have reached into the earth beneath the concrete, even if only metaphorically. In the days that follow, I notice small changes.